Good morning, everyone. Our warm welcome to teachers and students of around 30 DepEd divisions from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and to our guest schools division superintendent. Thank you for joining us in our first ever PLDT Infoteach webinar series, gearing up for the new normal in teaching and learning in partnership with UPOU. I'm Kat Diaz de Rivera, heading the Community Relations Division of PLDT, and I'll be your moderator for today. Very privileged, honestly, as I'm a parent of an incoming grade 5 schooler. So this webinar will be very, very beneficial for me, as well as with my fellow parents here online. For your appreciation, I'm sure most of our listeners or viewers now are aware PLDT and UPOU have a long-standing relationship through the PLDT InfoTeach Outreach Program. PLDT InfoTeach Outreach Program has been the flagship educational program of PLDT for 16 years. It champions digital literacy by empowering public high school students and elementary and high school teachers coming from school-based and barangay-based levels to pursue lifelong digital learning. Launched in 2004, providing learning opportunities by upgrading cyber technology skills through internet basic IT education. Of course, to high school students as well as elementary and high school teachers in partnership with Netopia. The PLDT InfoTeach outreach program has since produced over 30,000 student and out of school youth graduates coming from the different partner schools nationwide. The PLDT InfoTeach outreach program is an ongoing commitment to promote digital lifelong learning amid the pandemic. We continue to empower you, our teachers, and students by providing digital capabilities. In a way, we hope that our webinar series, which is starting today, will help pave the way for you and our teachers, parents, and students alike to traverse digital learning with the utmost confidence. We hope this helps you utilize online learning opportunities as well as digital solutions and tools. So, allow me to give you an overview of how our webinar series will look like. I mean, it's very exciting, or it's not just exciting, but at the same time, it'll be very insightful. We have organized our topics into four segments. First, of course, for our teachers here online, our learners. Third, our parents or guardians, and for everybody. We are privileged to have UPOU's Chancellor, Dr. Melinda Bandelaria, as our lead speaker, together with our schools division superintendent from selected schools who will provide their inputs and share practical tips to fellow teachers on how best to implement the blended learning system. There will be several topics that will be discussed, which is up and open for everybody to type in their questions, comments, and inputs via our chat system in UPOU Network's Facebook and in the chat box in the UP Network's website. For the teacher segment, so I've said kanina, our topics include preparing course for online, which is today, this morning. And then the second one, engaging learners online on August 3. Take note, and assessment of online engagement tools for August 7, and supporting online learners for August 10. On the other hand, students are given an online course on preparing to be an online learner. That's on August 5 as well. Also, a session on cybersecurity is also available to the public for everybody on August 14. Moreover, parents are, are also given a special webinar on how to support their children on online learners as online learners. This is on August 18. At the same time, of course, our local government unit representatives from the pre-selected school areas were also invited to join the webinar series this August 12. Abangan natin yan. Take note, August 12. Because PLDT recognizes the vital role that LGU plays in ensuring that the education sector can transition to digital learning with ease. This special webinar session is included for partner LGUs as they share some of their best practices in preparation for the school year. Some gentle reminders lang po. On issuance of certificates for this webinar, as shown here on screen, you may scan the QR code or go to the bit.ly site indicated. The certificates will be automatically sent to those completed their evaluation forms and were able to answer 7 out of 10 questions correctly. Please don't forget to evaluate this event and answer the questions. The online evaluation form will start receiving responses right after this event and will be available within the next 6 hours. Please take note the email address that you will input. Make sure that it's correct because that's where the reply will go to. So pag mali po yung email address, hindi nyo po makukuha yung feedback na tama. Now that you have a grasp of what's in store, and before I give the floor to our first guest, SDS, to share her thoughts about the first topic, we are already going 5 months, imagine, in quarantine. And I guess we already have adopted to this so-called new norm. Tayo mga Pinoy, mabilis tayo maka-adjust, sanay na tayo sa mga problema. Very resilient, nakakapag-adjust tayo sa galaw natin every day. Parang event lang paglabas natin, di ba? So sa pag-manage ng schedule natin sa work at oras sa pamilya. Although while we are adapting to this new normal in the time of digital learning, this still may bring such uncertainty. Lahat ito hindi natin nakalain. Not expected. Sanay na tayo kasi in our day-to-day school, work, lives na harapan tayo nakikipag-usap. And yung kausap natin ng office mate, co-teachers natin, pag may meeting tayo, kaharap natin sila pa nagpe-present. So, kausapin kasama natin yung mga kaklase natin, kausap natin yung boss natin. However, huwag kayong mag-alala. There are various ways in which you, our dear teachers, can confidently deliver online tools in the digital setting. So here with us online, who is already on standby, is Dr. Cheryl Gayola, Schools Division Superintendent from the Division of Marikina City.
Good
Dr.
morning.
Cheryl,
Good morning.
hi,
Good
hi.
morning, everyone.
So she graduated in 1995 with a degree in Bachelor in Secondary Education, major in Values Education. She served as a public school values education teacher for more than 15 years before being promoted as Education Program Supervisor in the Schools Division Office of Malabon City. She played an active role in the preparation of the curriculum and learning materials for education sa pagpakatao in the K-12 Basic Education Program. She has also been involved as a national trainer for the implementation of K-12 curriculum. After serving the Schools Division Office of Malabon for almost 6 years, she was designated as officer in charge of the Office of the Assistant Schools Division Superintendent of SDO Marikina and Manila, and later designated as OIC of the Office of Schools Division Superintendent and the Schools Division Office of Marikina. She earned her master's degree at the Philippine Normal University through a scholarship program of DepEd and PNU, and is currently earning another degree in public management and development at the Development Academy of the Philippines. So, to help us prepare, some ways in which you can do the preparation for your online course with so much ease, let's give our warm welcome and ears to Dr. Cheryl Gayola.
Okay, hello, good morning to everyone. Okay, a disruption like the COVID-19 pandemic demanded an abrupt change in the landscape in education. So the Department of Education has already started introducing alternative delivery modalities or flexible learning options. But for now, we are compelled to implement it immediately and at a very large scale. So in designing the learning continuity plan of SDO Marikina, we included online distance learning as one delivery modality. together with, of course, modular distance learning and partial blended learning, especially for learners from kinder to grade 3 who may need to be assisted by para teachers because of the absence of adults who will supervise their education. We have a learning management system that has been operating since 2015 or 2016 to cater to our high school learners for selected schools. So these schools have been implementing blended learning since then. So we decided to design our another learning management system to cater our elementary learners, specifically grade 4 to grade 6 learners. But ang instruction ko sa aming IT officer na si Ryan, who by the way is with us right now, that this LMS should have an added value compared to simple printed modules. Because in our initial plan, modular distance learning is the default modality across national capital region. This is necessary for us before we transition to online distance learning. But we really wanted to prepare our LMS before, because looking ahead, this will be more cost efficient compared to continuously reproducing modules for our learners year by year. But the challenge really is, how do we fully engage our learners in an online education? Infrastructure is one thing, but the materials that we will develop for the learners is another more important thing to consider. So the preparation of our LMS technical side wise was quietly done by our IT unit. But along the way, as we approached the opening of classes, there were needs that must be addressed and gaps to be filled. So these I will share today. The first thing is you must consider the readiness of the learners, the teachers, and the parents. So as we analyze the data from the learner enrollment and survey form, there is a need to filter the data to decide who is capable to be enrolled in our LMS. Our IT and SGOD team only considered those with laptops, desktops, and tablets, and those with stable internet connection. But the gadgets and the connection are just one of the requirements. You still have to assess the capacity of the teachers who will journey with the children in an online world. So as the learners and the parents, because we are talking about grade 4 to grade 6 learners who will require the guidance of parents in the process. That is why we decided to reach out to UPOU to request them to help us assess the readiness of our learners, parents, and teachers. We cannot just decide to enroll all learners with the infra and technology capability, because we also consider if we can provide sufficient number of teachers that can supervise our learners while they are learning online. So we need to continuously capacitate our teachers to be prepared and sort of reach a certain level of digital literacy to be able to assist our learners in the process. Next, of course, after assessing the needs, we must fill the gaps we have identified. To make this, we need to design a training to these three groups. No? In doing so, we need teachers who will train them and modules to guide the training. But because of time constraint, we initially chose to enroll learners with that require minimal training and reserve others for the remaining quarters while the training is ongoing. I guess another need is, how do we translate the modules designed by teacher into digitized format? The writers of the module should consider that the modules they are preparing will be both printed for modular distance learning and digitized for online distance learning. But there are only a few teachers who can do this. That is why in our adjusted plan for module writing, we will create a team of teachers who will write or design the modules. Consists of an content expert, an expert in pedagogy, and a digitally literate teacher, so that the byproduct will be the modules that can both be utilized for online and modular distance learning. Of course, this is only one aspect, so we also have issues on contextualization, alignment, and a whole lot of others. No? Next, assessment for me is another aspect that we sort of considered something that must be pondered on well. So, ang question in our mind is how do we ensure that we can get the most honest test result while doing the exams online? Not that we do not trust our learners, but there's a need to at least emphasize honesty or digital honesty, no, when it comes to this aspect. For us, assessment is very important. In the process, while the LMS can perform formative assessment, and it's designed for us to be able to provide enrichment activities for the learners, summative assessment is something that we have to look forward to preparing, no, well. Um, it's a dream for every division siguro to be more prepared, no, for online learning for our learners, especially if this will send a message that while the learners can be engaged in online learning, it means that they are more independent, no, when it comes to their studies. But I guess malayo pa po ang lalakbayin. There are a lot of things that has to be done, and that we are very thankful that there are partners around us who are willing to share what they know and what they have so that we can improve the implementation of our learning continuity plan, especially for this school year 2020-2021. So I guess that's all that I can share based on our experience in the preparation of our transition to the online world. Thank you very much po. Good morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cheryl, for that very insightful experience you have shared with us. Marami akong takeaway dun sa sinabi mo, being a parent of a schooler. I'm sure the listeners here have questions and inputs and comments. Please stand by with those. Later on, we will have a session for an open discussion with Dr. Cheryl. To everyone, kindly send us your questions to our UPOU Networks website, chat box, or through our UPOU Networks Facebook page so we could raise them up later in our open forum. All right. So for our next speaker, Dr. Melinda de la Peña Bandalaria, a professor at the University of the Philippines Open University, which she also serves as its chancellor since 2016. She was president of the Asian Association of Open Universities from 2017 to 2019. Dr. Bandelaria chairs the Asian MOOC Steering Committee. She has been actively involved in developing course modules for open online courses and teaching in this mode of instruction for more than 20 years. She has been doing research on open online courses and on universal design for learning as integrated into OERs and online courses. Dr. Bandelarias authored or co-authored a number of journal articles and book chapters in the field and has always been invited to keynote national and international conferences. An advocate of open education, she can be considered to have spearheaded the development and offering of MOOCs in the Philippines and its use by higher education institutions in the country under the model MOOCs as OERs as one strategy to improve the quality of education. She has led the university's initiative, #OpenFight, against COVID to help the educational institutions in the country to transition from classroom instruction to remote teaching and learning to ensure that learning continues even during the time of COVID-19 pandemic. Now, relative again to our topic, to share with us further her insights on how to prepare your course for online delivery, let's give our warm welcome and time, and let me give the floor to Dr. Melinda Bandelaria.
Yes, thank you very much, Ma'am Kat of PLDT, our longtime partner in the Infoteach outreach program of PLDT. This is our digital literacy training, and it is a pleasure to be with you all in this first session in our webinar series together with PLDT and, of course, our partner divisions offices, schools divisions offices. So again, welcome to our webinar participants. And I hope that today, this first session will just be a start of our learning journey. I'm sure that during the past few months, with all the webinar sessions happening all around us in the virtual world, I'm sure there were already some takeaways as we prepare ourselves for what we consider to be the new normal in education. So this session that we have now today will hopefully provide more insights as we continue that preparation. So more practical applications, more practical tips as we continue this preparation. We know that in less than 1 month from now, schools will open for the next school year. So really preparations now are in full swing. So let me share my slides with you, my presentation. Okay. Okay, so my presentation for this first session. So our theme for our webinar series is gearing up for the new normal in teaching and learning or in education. Our session for today, although our target audience, we said that this is for teachers, but we know that even those other stakeholders in education can also learn something from it. So preparing for remote instruction or remote or online teaching and learning, a session with the teachers. It's actually more of a conversation because later I'm also hoping that you will be able to also share during the open forum your own insights, your own experiences, your own concerns with regard to your preparations for online instruction. So, of course, it has been mentioned by both Ma'am Cheryl, by Kat, that really what happened during the early part of the year, it was really too sudden for us. In fact, it was described at the education sector as an unprecedented learning crisis that we really needed to address immediately, especially when the schools closed during the early part of the year. So we suspended classes, we closed schools, but after that initial reaction, we do realize that hey, it's something that that will happen for a long time, and it's not something that just like a storm or a flood that we can go back to school after 1 or 2 days or even 1 week. This is something that can really be long term, longer than months. It can even be longer than until the end of the year. So there has to be more preparations that we need to do. And probably it's something that can somehow make us feel, um, comfort us, something like that. It's something that the Philippines is not experiencing alone. This is a worldwide phenomenon. In fact, it was estimated by the Commonwealth of Learning that this COVID-19 pandemic resulted to over 90% of the world student population affected. So we're just part of this worldwide phenomenon, and the whole world's education sector are all now preparing for this transition to the remote teaching and learning. So, of course, we've been hearing this term, remote learning, remote instruction. So, just to give us some idea, what exactly does it mean? There are many terms that we've been hearing now: flexible learning, remote instruction, of course, online learning, e-learning, all those things. Blended learning is also something that we open here from those, especially when they are describing what will happen during the next school year. So remote learning is an emergency measure which attempts to replicate the classroom teaching and learning process. So there is already that assumption that what we really want to do is replicate what is happening in a face-to-face classroom. And through the use of technology, specifically the online technology, we will continue the teaching and learning process. And because of the nature that it happened during the early part of the year, they called it, those at the education sector called it emergency remote teaching and learning. But now that we have more time to prepare, the term emergency was already dropped. But there is still that, because we don't want to overwhelm our teachers, we always say that you will not start from scratch, because we will be starting from what you have, or from what you've been doing in your classroom instruction. So it is an attempt to replicate the classroom teaching and learning process in an online mode, and can also be considered a form of distance education. Why? Because the basic feature of distance education can also be found in remote instruction or in online learning, in distance e-learning. With the teachers and the students, the teacher is geographically separated from the student. So they are not together in a classroom. The students are in their homes. They are scattered all over, probably within the community, but still they are not present in the same physical space or classroom where the teacher is doing the actual teaching. So we all know that it was already announced that the school year will start on August 24, and the schools adopting various learning delivery mode or options. So we've been also hearing this distance online learning, homeschooling, and because of these things that are happening now, PLDT said, we also have to do our share in helping our Infoteach community, especially our Infoteach community, in preparing for this shift to online learning. So that's why um, we um, we thought of topics that can be discussed in our webinar sessions that we think will really help our teachers, our students, and even our partner LGUs. And just like what happened earlier, for each session that we will have a guest SDS to really share what's happening on the ground, to really share what are the concerns, the real concerns of our fellow educators, our fellow teachers, and their concerns on what will happen to their learners and how they can help their learners prepare for um, this online learning mode of delivery. So, and we know that this preparation is a multi-stakeholder approach. It's not just the teachers preparing, it's not just the schools preparing, but even the whole community and the parents should be preparing for this shift. So that's the reason why those who had been with us in our InfoTeach outreach program for many years already, you know that this is not the way that we've been doing the InfoTeach program, but this time we deemed it necessary that we should contribute to the kind of preparation that we should all be doing. Okay, so now that the school um, opening is drawing near, our question, how are we preparing for our teaching in the remote mode of instruction? This is a question that we are asking our teachers now, specifically our teachers. So, how are we preparing, especially with our teaching materials? And of course, later, we ourselves as teachers, how are we preparing ourselves in this mode of instruction? Okay, so this illustration, remote instruction, the essentials, this instruction, this figure is something that I always present when I do webinar sessions like this, just to show, just to show the different components. I call it the essentials in remote instruction. Just to show that there are many things that we need to prepare. So earlier, Ma'am Cheryl mentioned that technology, of course, the technology, they already prepared the technology. And because of the distance between the teacher and the students, we need to bridge that distance. And in terms of bridging the distance, technology is just one component. instructional materials is one major component, as well as the learner support services. So some of these things we will be discussing in our webinar session, future webinar session. So at one end, there is the trained teacher. And on the other end, our students, which we also need to prepare. For this particular session, we will be focusing on the trained teacher, and we will also be focusing on the preparation and the design of learning packages or instructional materials. Of course, there's also the educational institution or the school and the community, because we also need to mobilize the different resources of the community so that they will also be able to assist our students. So when we talk of online learning delivery, um, in the remote instruction or in distance education, we also think of how are we going to interact? How are we going to interact with our students? So there are these two modes of interaction. When you consider the time, when am I going to interact with my students? So there is this synchronous interaction, same time through the digital tools or platforms like Zoom that we are using now, and it's being also web streamed live in Facebook. So you now look at the different technologies or platforms. So we are using Zoom, and at the same time we are also using Facebook for us to accommodate the number of webinar participants that we have now. I was informed earlier that we have more than 10,000 participants.
10,025.
10,000
25.
25. Okay, that's earlier. That was before 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Probably, yeah, probably it's we have more than that number now. And then of course we also have the asynchronous or the different time interaction, wherein the teacher can do it on his or her own time, convenient to him or her, and the students will also do the same. I am more comfortable. I have more free time doing my reading, studying, my interaction with my fellow students, or posting in the learning management system. I have more time in the evening. Or if you are a morning person like me, then chances are you will be doing your studying very early in the morning. But not everyone is like that. Others are more comfortable doing it in the evening and staying late at night to study the lesson, do the readings, do the assignments, etc. So that is the asynchronous. I mean, you do it at your own time, at the time most convenient to you. So that is something that we also give, the kind of flexibility that we also give to both the teachers and the students when it comes to online learning mode of instruction. When we also talk of instructional materials, we can also consider the different formats of our instructional materials. Earlier, it was mentioned by Ma'am Cheryl that some of the materials can be printed, especially especially if the student does not have immediate access to a computer, to a gadget, or to an internet. So it's what we are saying. There's no reason why a student cannot study just because he or she does not have access to the internet. Because your instructional materials can be in the form of offline materials, all printed. In fact, UPOU in 1995 started that way. We were not using the internet. Internet was very new in the country at that time. That was 1995. But what we did was to have all our materials printed offline. So as we always say, um, the one criticism of online education, and we always hear this, is that what about those students who don't have access to the internet? And we're saying there's no reason why they should be left behind. And in fact, of course, DepEd is also part of the learning continuity plan, so that no student will be left behind simply because they don't have access to the internet. Of course, even digital materials like video materials can be accessed offline. So we put them in a USB, save all the video materials that we want our students to have, to view, to interact with, and can be accessed offline. I heard one official of a university in Metro Manila saying that they are doing this. It's in higher ed. They are doing this, putting all the videos in USB, and which can also be plugged in into a television, and they can watch the video materials in their television, and they don't need to access the internet. That is, if they really don't have access to a PC or to a laptop, etc. So they can also do that. Of course, there are also many offline technologies. UPOU already did a session on offline technologies wherein learners can also participate in digital learning activities, view the videos, even if they are offline. So if you want to look at that material, you can access it also in the UPOU website. Of course, we have the combination of printed and online digital materials. Some videos, if our students can have access to the internet, maaring hindi nga lang regular or ano, but they can still access, then you can also give them the links to the video materials, online resources, websites, etc., and even do the online activities. So you have that kind of combination. So when we start preparing, when we talk of preparing for our teaching in the online mode of instruction, these are the things that we also, major things, basic things that we need to keep in mind. How will I interact with my students? How necessary is it for me to do the synchronous or same time interaction? What are we going to do during the same time or synchronous session? And what are the activities that I can ask my students to do when it comes to a synchronous or different time interaction using a learning management system? So I'm sure that many of our webinar participants are now already familiar with the learning management system, and probably at this point you already know what kind of learning management system, for those who will be doing online, what kind of learning management system you will be using for the next school year. But for me, the other important consideration is how are we going to give the instructional materials, the modules, the course materials to our students, so that we will be sure that they can access the content, they can access the lesson, and they will not be left behind when we are talking of achieving the learning goals for our subject or the subject that we will be teaching. So that's always the primary consideration in our mind. Okay, so let's first discuss preparing the instructional materials. That's one of the major topics for this particular session. When we talk of instructional materials, we are also talking of the course pack. Okay, so what are we going to provide to our students? DepEd may be providing modules. I think there was this plan to provide the modules. I'm just not so sure what format will it be, when it will be available. But the thing is, when we talk of course material, when we talk of course pack, then we are also talking about it's not important the term that we are using, but what is important would be the content of this course package that we will provide to our students. So one important component and one important document that we need to have is a subject or course guide, the subject guide. It contains the general information about the subject that we will be teaching. The course module, it is always a question or a request that we receive at UPOU. Something like, okay, we will do distance education, we will do online teaching. Can you teach us how to write our modules? So something that we also need to prepare. We can look at what DepEd will provide us, but we can also look at the different learning activities, the different lesson guides that we need to prepare also, so that we can contextualize the learning process to that of our students. And at times, we recommend that there is a separate document which will detail the assignment or the course requirements guide. Because the reason for this is sometimes, especially for us at UPOU, we are a fully online university, and in most cases, we offer the courses or the subject every year. The course module or the study guide, the lesson guide may not change, may not change. Because it represents the core lesson that the students should learn. But sometimes the teacher can change the assignment, can change the course requirement, can change the learning activity. So we usually separate that kind of document or that document, and also for easy reference by our students. So course material package is always considered to be the backbone in remote teaching and learning. Without that, our students will be lost. What would they study? Unlike in a face-to-face classroom wherein they will go to the class, they will attend our class, and we will do the lecture. But here, what will they be studying? So it is important that we package all the lessons into one complete document and provide that to our students way before the start of classes. What we usually do here is that at least 1 week before the start of classes, our students should already have the materials that they will be using for the entire semester or the entire school year. Okay, so let's take a look at these documents one by one. So the general subject guide, or what we call at the university, the course guide. So the course guide should contain the general information about the subject that you are teaching. So like for instance, the title of the subject, if it's English 1 or Communication 2, general science, biology, chemistry, it has to have the title. I mean, so that our students, especially our students will be enrolled in several subjects. Like high school students, how many subjects will they be enrolling? 4, 5. So each document should be completely identified. For what
Identified.
particular subject will this be used? And the name of the teacher, your name, and how you be contacted. How can your students connect with you, contact you? Or if it's the parents, sometimes it's the parents contacting the teachers, diba? So kahit po sa amin, even for us at the higher education at UPOU, sometimes we receive emails, we receive calls from the parents of our students. Minsan nga, mas madalas pa kami makipag-usap sa mga magulang, especially for our undergraduate courses. They call us and they inquire how their students would go about in their online learning. During the past months, for instance, yung mga kaibigan natin na whose daughters, sons, children will be enrolling at UPOU, I've been receiving emails from them. How can we do this? What exactly is the mode of instruction, etc., etc. So that's why it is also essential, and that will be part of one of our sessions for us to also prepare and have students orientation. And the students orientation, we suggest that you include also the parents so that they will know. But this is one document, the general subject guide is one ready document where you will put there your name, how can you be contacted, your email address. Since this is online, it is assumed that the students, the parents can also contact the teacher online. Of course, in some cases, our students already know us, diba? Because if they've been to our school in the previous years, they're not new students, and we are not a new teacher in the school, then probably kilala na nila tayo. But still, it helps to know na ito pala yung teacher ko. Siya pala yung teacher ko ngayon. Ganyan. So, the name of the teacher and how the teacher can be contacted. General schedule. It is important that we provide our students with a general schedule if we're going to hold synchronous sessions, a Zoom lecture like this. It has to be scheduled way in advance and should be contained in this particular document so that the learner can also be prepared. Ito kailangan din to, especially if our student in their family ay hindi lang sila nag-iisa na nag-aaral online. Probably they will be sharing resources like laptop. They will be sharing, syempre yung internet. Pagka dalawa na yung nag-online lecture na ganito, medyo makonsumo yan sa bandwidth. At kung ang kanilang connectivity ay medyo mabagal, mahihirapan sila to connect. So they can also plan. I mean, the family can plan if we are going to provide them with a schedule ahead of time, even examinations. If it's an online examination, then they should be ready. And they will also be guided. They will also be guided. Like for instance, oh, by this time pala, ito na yung lesson na gagawin ko. So usually the general schedule contains the lesson and the particular period wherein that lesson will be discussed. So like for instance, week 1, from this date to this date, we will be discussing this particular lesson. In doing so and in providing this very detailed activity or schedule to our students, they can also assess, naiiwan ba ako? Advance ba ako? O kung magiging busy ako sa susunod na linggo, I can make an advanced reading and I can even do my assignments ahead of time and even submit them ahead of time. That's also allowed, diba? So examinations, of course, yun nga, yung para makapag-prepare din sila. So very detailed schedule of activity, the dates, the period, and what they should be doing for that particular period or schedule. It is also important that we give them a general view of the lessons that we will be discussing, that you will be discussing for the entire year or the entire semester. So I mentioned earlier about the specific schedule for the lesson, and I have mentioned already the schedule and the specific lesson will keep the student on track of the schedule, assess. Or if we are talking here of those who at the elementary level, di ba? Even the parents can also check. Ano na ba dapat ang dinidiscuss ngayon? Ano na ba dapat ang pinag-aaralan ngayon nung aking anak or nung aking ginagabayan sa pamilya na nag-aaral online. The schedule, this kind of organizer, I call it organizer, can also provide a semblance of classroom schedule or instruction. Kasi di ba tayo, meron din tayong schedule na kinikip as teacher. By this time, kailangan natapos na natin i-discuss itong mga lessons na to. So tayo rin, alam din natin na ano ba yung dapat kong ginagawa at itinuturo dito sa schedule na to. So magmamatch na yung schedule mo at saka yung schedule ng mga estudyante mo in the same way that we are doing it in a classroom instruction. And of course, in doing this kind of scheduling, etc., and helping our students in yung pag-face nila do sa kanilang sarili and their activities, it will keep them engaged. Kasi alam nila na ito na pala dapat ang ginagawa ko. Hindi pala dapat pala nagbabasa na ako, dapat pala ginagawa ko na tong learning activity na to. So it will keep them engaged. Hindi sila yung bukas ko na lang gagawin to. Wala naman sinabi si ma'am na deadline na nito eh. Hindi naman sinabi ni sir na kailangan kong gawin to, etc. But if we give them this schedule, it will keep them engaged, it will keep them on track, it will help them assess their progress with regard to the academic activities. It is also important that we all already explain the policies. Ano ba yung mga policy do sa kurso mo? Sa classroom instruction, it is easy to remind our students. Bawal mag-submit ng late ha. Ano bang policy mo sa face-to-face instruction in a classroom instruction? We check the attendance of our students. The question is, in an online instruction, will you also be doing that? Will you be checking attendance when it comes to synchronous sessions? But what about the asynchronous sessions? So you have to give the kind of information so that your students will also be guided. Mahirap yung hindi nila alam na pala umabsent ako dito, ika-count na pala to na absent sa akin, baka mamaya ma-drop ako. Diba? And also, if there are general references, which I think is very common, especially in basic ed, that we have a reference book, etc., we also give that information to our students and contained in this particular document, the general subject guide. So that if the school is not providing this particular book, then our students will be able to look. Manghihiram sila doon sa mga nauna sa kanila na senior high, for instance, second year or third year, ganyan. So hihiram na lang sila doon na ito pala yung gagamitin ko sa taon na to. So hihiram na lang ako sa kanya. But it is important that we provide that kind of information well ahead of time. And again, contained in this particular subject guide. By providing the complete information, through this document, it can be printed, it can be online, uploaded in your learning management system, or emailed to your students so that it can also be a ready reference. Um, we will also reduce the anxiety that our students may feel. Remember that if this is a new journey for our students, and probably they are at a loss. How shall I go about it? How will I study? How will I pass my course, etc. So by providing the information well ahead of time, we are also reducing the level of anxiety of our students, their parents or guardians, and at the same time, we are reducing the questions that they will be asking from us. Kasi sabihin, pakibasa po muna yung ating ibinigay na general subject guide or the course guide. And then if there are questions, then that's the time that you can inquire. Kasi totoo naman na posibleng hindi lahat ay maibibigay natin. But at least the general information, if we can provide them well ahead of time, marireduce na yung pagtawag sa atin, pag-email sa atin, marireduce din yung time ng pagsagot natin, etc. And then we can focus more on the preparations that we really need to do when it comes to the learning materials or the lessons and the learning activities. Okay, so when we talk of the subject or course guide, this is the kind of structure. So there is the general course guide, and under that or the subject guide, there will be the modules or what we call the lesson guide. So module 1, module 2, module 3. If you want each lesson to be a module, then you can have as many as 10, 15 modules. Kanina si Ma'am Cheryl, she mentioned the modular approach. So this is something that we can consider na we chunk our lessons into bite-sized pieces. Yung madaling basahin, madaling intindihin, stand-alone lessons or chunk of lesson. So the compilation of our study or lesson guides will now be our course module. So pag binuo mo yan, meron ka module 1, module 2, module 3, you compile it, now you will have your complete course module. Okay, so what should be contained in our course module or our lesson guide? As I mentioned, it can be a compilation. In a face-to-face meeting, we plan each meeting with our students. Even the DepEd module, you have that kind of planning. What shall I be discussing for this particular meeting with my student? And of course, yung pagplano natin, if we are meeting our students for 1 hour, then we plan what are the activities that I will be doing for 1 hour. Or if we have medyo malaki-laki yung lesson natin, how long shall I be discussing this particular lesson? If it's for 1 week and I am meeting my students 3 times a week, anong i-discuss ko sa first meeting, anong i-discuss ko sa second, anong i-discuss ko sa third. And then we can translate those meeting plans into a format which is appropriate for online learning. So each lesson guide should contain the title of the lesson. Ano ba yung pag-uusapan natin? The schedule. At what point? What's the duration? What's the schedule? What the starting date and the final date? Wherein this lesson will be discussed. This particular schedule or lesson will be discussed. So I put here Ganya's 9 events of instruction. I think some of you may still be following this. Wherein we have the overview of the lesson, the objectives. Very important that we also indicate or articulate the objectives for the particular lesson. Of course, the lesson proper. It is usually the kind of teaching. What are we teaching when we do when we do it in a classroom instruction? Nagle-lecture ba tayo? Nagpa-PowerPoint ba tayo? Nagsusulat ba tayo sa blackboard or whiteboard? Or meron tayong mga presentations na ginagawa? Meron ba tayong mga handouts na ipinamimigay sa mga estudyante natin? So yon. So we think of that also. Learning activity. There has to be detailed instruction. After natin na maibigay yung input natin, maituro natin yung lesson, what activities can we design or develop so that we can further facilitate the learning of our students, yung active learning na tinatawag. And there has to be detailed instruction. Later, we will be discussing this learning activities. And of course, if there are additional readings or materials that that we want our students to engage in or to interact with, then we also include that in this lesson or study guide. As I mentioned, we can start with our daily meeting lesson plan because it will ensure the chunking of the lesson into bite-sized pieces. Okay, so course overview. Ano ba yung nilalagay natin sa course overview? It is a general statement about the nature of the module or the lesson and its relation to the course as a whole. It should not only introduce the topic of the lesson or the module, but should also forecast the content and organization of the module. So I have here one example. This is a course that I am teaching at the master's level, but somehow it will give you an idea of what a course or a module overview should contain or the lesson overview. So this is a particular lesson, development communication materials, nature, advantages, and limitations. And I put here the overview for this particular lesson and how it relates to the whole course. Of course, the learning objectives, I have mentioned this already. The specific outcomes that relate to each individual module and not, so it's for the particular lesson. What students are expected to learn for that particular lesson and the outcomes. We have to make sure that the outcomes are aligned properly with the assessment or the learning activities that we will design for our modules. So we can also check whether we have this the statement how we state our learning objectives. So in here, of course, many of you are familiar. In fact, all of you probably are familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy. So we have from the knowledge, understanding, and application, and what kind of learning objectives can we use for specific lessons that we will be developing for for the subject that we are teaching. Of course, a lesson proper or the learning resources, we call it the input from the teacher. So how are we to teach that particular lesson to our students? So it can be teacher created, PowerPoint presentations, our lecture. It can be a video material from the internet. So we can provide the link to our students, or if it's really necessary for us to do it, we download the material, put it in a USB, and then distribute to our students. It can also be a chapter from a book. So we ask our students, read this particular chapter, etc. So that will be our input. It can be a handout. It can also be a report. Sometimes we can also simulate the class reporting activity that we usually do in our classroom instruction. We assign a topic or a lesson to our students, and then they will do the reporting in class. And reporting online can also be done. You can have it in a session like this, synchronous session, or you can the student can video himself, herself doing the report. And this is also a very effective way to keep the learners engaged, especially in terms of interacting with the content. Or we can also invite guest resource person. So in an online setting, it is very easy now to invite resource person because you just provide a link, just like what we are doing. Ma'am Cheryl earlier, she delivered her part of the session in Marikina. So nandun siya, nasa sasakyan nga siya while doing it. Ma'am Kat, I think is nasa bahay niya. Ako nandito rin ako sa bahay ko. And all our technical team, they are scattered all over. And in a class like this, we can invite a resource person kahit siya ay nasa labas ng bansa. Diba? Because it's very easy. Unlike if it's a classroom instruction, na doon natin papupuntahin. So it's always, for me, it is a very good opportunity. And online instruction is also a very good opportunity for us teachers to also invite resource persons to be part of our teaching in an online mode of instruction. At this point, I also would like to discuss, as part of the learning resources or the lesson proper, the open educational resources or OERs. These are resources that are available at little or no cost and which you can use for your teaching, learning, and of course, if you want to do research, you can also use it for your research. So you don't need to pay for the IPR, the copyright, because they are usually licensed and can be used for free. They can be textbook, they can be course reading, simulations, games, learning applications, even course syllabi, quizzes, assessment tools, and many other materials which can be used for educational purposes. It can even be just a photograph. Just a photograph of something, and which you can use to introduce a lesson, for instance. So that even a photograph, depending on how the teacher would use it, can serve as an open educational resources. So usually they are electronic resources. We can access them online, and they are released under a Creative Commons license. So we always have to look for that, about the license that the material carries, so that we will be guided in terms of how we will be using that particular material. So open educational resources can originate from colleges, universities, libraries, archival organizations, government agencies, even commercial organizations such as publishers. Lalo ngayon, ang dami-daming publisher who are making their materials, books, journals, be accessed for free. Ang dami na. So, those normally na binibili natin, yung mga publishers, many publishers are now making the books available for free. So, let's take advantage of that. We can download them and use them for our teaching. And when we talk of open educational resources, there are unique rights that are associated with open content. So these are retained if you are the one developing the material. You are a teacher, you have developed your presentation, and you want to share it with your fellow teacher, you can still retain. Hindi yun nanakawin sa'yo. Kasi you can still retain the right to that material. You are just making it open and accessible for free, but you will still be cited as the one who developed the material. Other teachers, other users can reuse them sa kanilang sariling pagtuturo, etc. Use your PowerPoint, reuse your PowerPoint. They can revise it. So like for instance, I can contextualize it. If my students are like this, then probably this particular, the way it was presented may not be appropriate to the students that I have, then I will revise it. I can mix it with other materials that are also open source, and I can also share them. So like for instance, if I got the materials as open source, then I can also share them as open source material, so that it will also benefit other educators or other students. So those are the 5 R's associated with open content, such as open educational resources. So these are the Philippine initiatives. So you can probably say na karamihan naman ng mga libreng materials are not Western ganyan, or not applicable to our context. We also have our own OER Philippine initiatives. One is the UPOU networks. So this is the website. It is our platform for our open educational resources on different topics. So ang dami-dami yun ang pwedeng makuha dito, and then you can view them, use them, etc. TVUP is another OER platform. This is also the website, the link. You can also check it out. And again, there are many materials that you can get from them, from this platform. Another platform is this oercommons.org. This is also a platform for sharing, especially for teachers. And this is being maintained by UNESCO. So if you can see here, there are many different countries contributing to this particular platform. And if you want to see, like for instance, what other countries are doing, how they are introducing their history, for instance, etc., then you can also check the materials that they have. And as you may have noticed, the Philippines is contributing to this particular platform. So nandito yung flag natin, and then if you want to check it out, you can just click the Philippine flag to see what the Philippines has contributed to this particular platform. Of course, you are all familiar with the DepEd Commons. This is the initiative of our DepEd, so that open educational resources can also be provided both to teachers and students. And for the higher ed, of course, it doesn't mean that because it's by CHED, it doesn't mean that you cannot access it. Even those at the basic ed, you can also access the materials at the Phil CHED Connect, which is the repository of OERs, and this is a CHED initiative. So for the Philippines, this is something that that we have now. We continue to populate them. Of course, for Southeast Asia, we have the the Southeast Asian platform by the CIMIO Secretariat, wherein the Philippines is also contributing to that. So if you want to see more open educational resources, you just visit these platforms and repositories. These are other OER repositories, and from here, you can get materials, teaching materials developed by other organizations. So, of course, I think many of you are already familiar with the Khan Academy. Ito yung mga early players when it comes to open educational resources. And of course, Merlot is something that also has a wide collection of open educational resources, as well as Open Learn, Connection, the BBC Learning. They have many materials. And in fact, ang lagi kong sinasabi, I always say this, we should not be constrained with the cost of materials online. Yung kailangan pa nating bayaran para lang natin magamit. Because ang dami-dami na ngayon which are being shared for free. And we just need to know where to look for them, and use them in our own teaching and in our online courses. Learning activities. So after, di ba, usually in a classroom instruction, pagkatapos nating mag-lecture, ano yung mga ginagawa natin? We usually give quizzes, di ba? Or minsan ina-announce natin yan, okay? After ng meeting natin ngayon, okay class, next meeting, prepare for a quiz. Para alam natin na mag-aaral sila. Kasi we want them to engage more with the content. Kasi pag in-announce natin na magku-quiz tayo sa susunod na meeting, mag-aaral sila. Diba? Mag-aaral sila eh. So, since mag-aaral sila, mag-i-engage pa sila, i-review nila yung lecture, pag-aaralan nila yung lecture natin. Pag naman tayo nag-surprise quiz, gusto natin, may naintindihan kaya sila sa lecture ko ngayon. Ganyan. So, these are learning activities, or we ask them to do projects. Ganyan. So, it's the same thing when we talk of online learning. We develop learning activities which will facilitate the learning. And of course, our primary objective is for them to achieve the learning goals that we set for that particular lesson. I have also included here another objectives in developing learning activities, so it will keep our students motivated. We have to note that yun ngang nami-meet natin sila, we meet them regularly in a classroom setting. Sometimes it's really difficult to keep them motivated and engaged, di ba? Yun yung lagi kong sinasabi na kahit pa magtumbling minsan sa harapan yung teacher, ay minsan yung mga estudyante ay nakatingin lang sa'yo. Di ba? So how are we going to do this? It's really a challenge to do it in an online learning. So the learning activities, we have to develop them in such a way that we will keep them motivated, we will keep them happy, we will keep them engaged, so that in the process, we will prevent them from dropping the subject that we are teaching. And of course, along with this learning the lesson and achieving the learning objectives, we are asking them, or we are also facilitating the learning of the associated skills. Like, for instance, the 21st century competencies or skills. So if we ask our students to be online, to use the technology, the internet, for instance, then we are already teaching them the digital literacy. If we are asking them to choose the materials from the internet, we are also teaching them a multimedia information literacy. Diba? So the associated skills, we are also teaching them in the way we will want them to engage in the different learning activities. So these are just examples of the learning activities that we can ask our students to do. Of course, again, we design them depending on the learning goals that we want to achieve. So different examples. Again, different examples of learning activities, workshop, there's the Q&A, there's the debate, there's the competition, games, we want to gamify it, etc. We will be discussing more of this in our next session in terms of when we discuss on how we can keep our learners engaged online. But we have to take note that in designing our courses, in designing or preparing our courses for online delivery, we have to make sure that we will be integrating the different types of interactions that are deemed necessary to promote or facilitate learning. So it's the learner content interaction. So like, for instance, how can we ask our students to read a particular material, to read the book, to read the chapter, view the video material that we're asking them to do it, to view. So it's a learner content interaction. Para lang natin binigyan ng reading assignment, etc. Learner content. Learner interaction. They will be interacting with their fellow students. Discussion, debate, collaborative writing, etc. So we have to make sure that there is that kind of interaction. And of course, the learner-teacher interaction, wherein the students will be interacting with the teacher, and these are some examples of the activities that we can design in our courses so that we can also ensure the learner-teacher interaction. Okay, so the important things to consider when we design our courses is, of course, again, the achievement of the learning goals, keeping our learners engaged, and we have to note that we also need to provide a very good learning journey to our students. So the students need to feel connected to each other, to the teacher, and to the content, and we can prevent them from dropping the course because online learning can really be an enjoyable journey, especially for our students. I mean, they are very very good in using technology, majority of them. So we give it to them in using these particular technologies for learning purposes. This is another document that we need to prepare, the assignment guide. It contains the detailed instruction about the assignment. We always give our students some things to do outside of the course or outside of the classroom meeting. So we give them the instruction, kailan nila isasubmit, paano nila isasubmit, and paano natin sila gigradean. Diba? If I may cite another example, I heard this shared by one principal in a school in Cavite, I think. Since hindi nga lahat ng estudyante ay pwedeng naka-online, meron silang Dropbox sa school. So may option yung estudyante na yung parents, for instance, ay ida-drop na lang niya doon yung assignment ng estudyante. Ganyan, para makolekta at mag-grade ng teacher. So pwede rin niyang pick upin kung nag-grade na ng teacher para mabigyan ng feedback yung estudyante. O kung online naman, o di pwedeng gawing online yung submission, but they should know that there are many ways of submitting the assignment para hindi naman ma-feel left behind yung ibang estudyante na walang access sa internet. So importante, deadline, meron ba akong point deduction? Kasama yan dapat sa policy natin kapag hindi na isubmit online or on time yung particular assignment or project. And what about you, teachers? How are you preparing yourself? So kanina pinrepare natin yung mga materials na ibibigay natin sa estudyante. Tayo, paano ba tayo nagpe-prepare? Again, this is also a new journey. for many of us. Kanina sinabi ni Ma'am Cheryl na in Marikina, blended learning sila. May mga schools na nag-implement ng blended learning. So it means to say that some teachers already have that experience of teaching online. But that's still different because there's that opportunity pa rin for you to meet your students. Now, in this mode of instruction, ang sinabi ni Secretary Briones, pwedeng mag face-to-face meeting in some areas in 2021, January 2021. So ibig sabihin, pagbukas ng klase ng Agosto until December, we are fully online. So how are we preparing ourselves? So we prepare the materials which we will give to our students, but what about us? So kanina, dun sa pinakita kong illustration, trained teachers, already teachers, to do the online instruction. We are all familiar with this TPCK model: technology, pedagogy, content, knowledge. Yung pedagogy and content, medyo hindi na natin masyadong pag-uusapan yan. Although, in terms of pedagogy, we need to make some adjustments because we are being online or we will do it online. Of course, yung content, there's no doubt naman that you are experts, you know the content of the subject that you are teaching. Of very particular concern now is the technology knowledge. What kind of technology that you will be using for your teaching online? Will you be using the Zoom platform? Will you just be using the Facebook Live? Kasi sa totoo lang ako, hindi pa ako nakakagamit ng Facebook Live. So I don't know. The other day I was trying to share or host a watch party or something like that. Hindi ko alam kung anong aking i-click doon. So it is also important that we know if we will be using this particular technology, kailangan din nating pag-aralan how are we going to do it or how are we going to use it. If we will be using a learning management system, we have to be familiar with the features of the learning management system. If we have PowerPoint presentations that we are using in our classroom instruction and we want to provide or to integrate a voice or translate that into a video lecture, how can we do that? What are the free software that you can use? Kasi ang dami rin namang mga libreng software that we can use so that we can translate our classroom presentation into a video lecture. So yung learning resources na gagamitin natin, just like as I mentioned earlier, the open educational resources. The technology that we will be using to support our students, email for instance, or even monitor students' progress, like learning analytics, even just the basic learning analytics that can be provided by a learning management system, we should be familiar with its application in terms of providing support to our students. Technology to seek support or communicate, collaborate with our fellow educators, communicate with the school officials, with our SDS, with our ITO, for instance, and still be part of the community of practice with our fellow educators, the sharing of resources with our fellow educators. What kind of technology can we use so that we can still stay connected with them even if we are isolated or nandun lang tayo sa bahay, nag-work from home tayo? Of course, we have to have that kind of mindset. We need to embrace it. And we also have to accept this changing role of the teacher. That hindi naman tayo mawawala ng trabaho simply because nag-adapt tayo ng technology for our teaching. Again, we have to note that these are just tools. We are still the teacher. We are still designing the learning of our students. That's why I always call the teachers are the architects of learning. Pinuput together lang natin yung mga resources. Kung saan man ang galing ang resources na yan, tayo pa rin yung nagdi-design kung paano natin ibibigay yan sa estudyante at paano matututunan ng mga estudyante natin yung mga lesson na dapat nilang matutunan sa kurso natin. So we are the architects of learning. We may no longer be the sage on the stage. We will just be the guide on the side. But at the same time, at the back, yung sa backstage, we are the architects. We design their learning. And of course, we have to embrace the culture of research. as well as the openness. We have to monitor in the same way that we are monitoring the progress of our students in a classroom teaching. Kailangan ganun din yung gagawin natin online. That's why we have to be familiar with the different tools that we can use in monitoring and evaluating the progress of our students. And of course, this is something that we are really advocating, the culture of openness and sharing. Kung may nakita tayong magandang resources, i-share din natin sa mga kapwa natin teachers, yung mga best practices natin in online teaching. We share them and let our fellow teachers, fellow educators learn from our own practice. These are you may want to look at this. These are 50 back to school activities for the remote learning classroom. Ang nakalagay dito, ditch that textbook. Ito may iba-iba ito. This is the website where I got it. So preparing your online classroom, during the first week of school activities, ano yung mga dapat gawin, building lessons, check-in, etc. So maraming pwedeng basahin at 25 beginning or of the year activities, connecting with families remotely. Ang marami silang diniscuss, and they will also direct, the article will also direct you to the different tools which you can use, and this most of them are free tools and platforms na pwedeng gamitin, and will keep your learners engaged in online instruction. Tapos i-enjoy pa rin nila. Engage na sila, i-enjoy pa nila yung online instruction. Again, just two reminders. One, technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. And this is something that I always say. For those who look at online learning as a second-class thing or of lower class or quality of instruction, note that physical proximity isn't a precondition for good education. Comparing one form of education to another distracts us from the fact that all forms of education can and should be made better. And making online education good, of good quality, and in fact, even be better than a classroom instruction is on the hands of us teachers. Tayo ang gagawa noon. Tayo ang magde-decide kung paano magiging quality noong online education na ibibigay natin sa ating mga estudyante. Again, we are talking here of online education, but of course, we also have to consider that not everyone will have access to the internet, to the technology, and we don't want this kind of picture to happen. So whatever mode of learning delivery you will choose, online man, blended man, just be mindful that if we are providing equity in access, we make sure that everyone will be enrolled in our course, in that subject that we are teaching. We also have to be sure that there will also be the equity in learning outcomes. Kung ito ang learning goals natin for a particular lesson, for a particular course, we have to make sure that whatever technology will be made available to our students or accessible to our students, they will achieve the learning outcomes that we have set for our courses. Okay, so I think that's my last slide. So here, this is our website, the upou.edu.ph. You can access that for some information about what we are doing to help our fellow educators transition to the new normal in teaching and learning. Networks.upou.edu.ph. Again, this is our platform for the open educational resources that we have developed. You can access many materials there. And if you are really interested to undergo training, pre-training, online training on teaching, online teaching and learning, then you can also access the model.upou.edu.ph. And if you want to get in touch with me after the session, this is my email address. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and I think we can proceed to the open forum with Ma'am Kat moderate.
And Dr. Cheryl. Thank
Very
you,
nice.
Dr. Mel. Sobrang dami ko natutuhan. Actually, marami akong notes and points to ponder. But before that, before we open the open discussion with Dr. Cheryl, I'd like to acknowledge our participants. Kanina kasi I mentioned here in the Philippines, we have listeners of around, as you've mentioned a while ago, around 10,025 participants na. I think kaninang morning yon, so I'm not sure how many na tayo ngayon. But hindi lang pala Philippines. So we have international listeners
Ah,
from Morocco, Bangladesh, and Dubai. So thank you for joining us. If you're a student or a teacher, I hope you're learning since this morning. We have also two comments already in FB. We'll mention that later. And then the coming from your presentation, Dr. Mel, I have some points that struck me na kailangan actually sa point of view ng mga teachers natin. So, and point of view na rin ng mga parents who are here online. Um, One is yung time of interactions,
mm,
yung synchronous asynchronous. So I guess ang takeaway ko doon sa slide na yon is kasi given that our setup is before kasi yung mga parents pag nagwo-work sila nasa office. Tapos yung mga estudyante nasa
nasa
school.
school.
Tapos may oras tayo pag-uwi nasa bahay
Mm,
lahat.
mm.
Ngayon
Sa
sa
bahay lahat.
lahat nasa bahay.
Oo, totoo.
Kaya yung time management mo
Totoo.
talagang challenge.
Mm,
So,
totoo.
yung interaction mo nga, I guess you have to think about na you have to find the right rhythm and balance as you go about the daily duties that you have to portray. Kasi
Mm.
lahat nasa isang space. So, yon marami tayong actually maiisip, ponder dun sa
Can I add another point? O, Ma'am Kat, doon sa sinabi mo kanina, yung sa synchronous, ano, kasi nga same
opo.
time. Kaya nga, importante nga na maiano natin yung schedule. Kailan tayo magsisynchronous interaction with our students. So, we need to give the schedule. At pagka nga nagkataon na marami sila sa bahay, yun nga lang dalawa. May dalawa kang anak na parehong nag-o-online.
Oo,
Ikaw ay nagwo-work from, ikaw siguro isa kasi yung anak mo so wala ka
opo.
problema. Balik kayo lang dalawa yung magkaagaw sa ano, di ba? Pero kapag ka meron kang dalawang anak, iisa ang laptop na pwede mong i-provide, 'di ba?
Mm,
So it's really a challenge to the parents. Then nagwo-work from home pa nga yung parents, ganyan. Usually ang advice natin sa mga teachers, kapag ka Zoom ang gagamitin mo or even Google Meet, I think, pwede mong i-record. 'Di ba? Nare-record yung mga lectures eh. So kung hindi makapakinig yung estudyante at the time na synchronous yung ano mo, yung ganito,
mm.
platform na ganito, pwedeng yung recording ang kanilang i-access. So hindi pa rin nila mamimiss yung lecture mo. Hindi nga lang sila makakapagtanong, pwede siguro maririnig nila yung mga sagot mo doon sa tanong ng ibang kaklase, pero at least hindi mo sila deprive of the opportunity to learn from your lecture,
Mm,
'di ba?
mm, mm.
So record and make available to your
Correct.
students. Oo.
Oo.
Para ma-manage nila kasi nga mahirap eh. I mean, it's a real challenge. Dalawang apo ko sabay mag-aaral, parehong elementary, isang kinder at isang grade 1. So paano mo yung manage yun? Sabay na sabay yung schedule nila. So it's really a challenge. Just given, kanina may nabasa, the learning space sa bahay.
Yes,
Already a
kay Mr.
challenge. Already a
Chonilo
challenge.
Saldon, yeah.
So talagang kailangan i-manage. Really to
Mm.
manage. Ganun. Sige, tuloy mo na. Baka lang malimutan ko yung point na yun eh.
Iba pa
Si
yung
Ma'am
ano eh,
Kat
no?
joining us now. Si Ma'am Kat.
Yes, si Dr. Cheryl. So iba pa, na-mention ka nga po, Dr. Cheryl, dito na while you're mobile, you're presenting, you're talking. So iba pa yung point na nasa ibang area ka. So nandun yung challenge din sa connectivity, and
Yeah.
then yung focus mo, madidistract ka kung ano yung surroundings mo, di
Yeah.
ba? And then the my another point here, wala lang name. This new normal in education is going to be very challenging to both educators and students. I wonder how DepEd will address the problem with the non-readers who do not have access to the internet, computers, other gadgets, and would opt to study using print modules when reading itself is a big challenge. So
Si
yon. So,
si Ma'am SDS. baka, baka may strategy si Ma'am kung paano
oo.
gagawin yun.
Actually, dyan po namin nakikita appropriate yung partial blended learning
Mm-mm.
namin. So we're working with our local government unit so that we can hire para teachers
Yeah.
who can reach out to the community,
Mm-mm.
especially for learners na without adults assisting them
Yeah.
for kinder to grade 3. So that's our plan. So we'll be training para teachers who can engage para sa community learning, and the para teachers that will be choosing should come from the same community to
Community.
ensure safety and
Yes.
following of the health protocols. So we have already mapped our learners, and then we'll identify para teachers who can work with us to assist these learners, especially non-readers,
Yeah.
who do not have access to internet. So doon po namin gagamitin yung partial blended learning namin na
Oo.
plan.
So ma'am, doon pumapasok din talaga yung collaboration with the community, ano?
Yes po.
Oo. Kasi yung isa namang narinig ko about that, parang mga volunteers. Mga volunteers sa community yung ginagamit nila. Minsan mga nanay na nagsasama-sama, yung iba mga retired teachers din na nagbo-volunteer to teach yung mga grupo-grupo din, 1, 2, 3 students. So yung ginawa ni ma'am, I think that's a very good practice na nakamap yung kanilang mga estudyante, and then may naka-assign na para teachers. So yun nga, yung sa isang community, volunteers, mothers, yung mga ganon ang inano nila to supervise nga yung mga yung sabi nga ni ma'am, walang adult supervision doon sa bahay. So I guess alam mo talaga kung iisipin, pwedeng magawa ng paraan. Kaya sabi ko sa inyo, si mama i-guess natin kasi hindi, kasi alam mo may marami siyang share about what they are doing in Marikina.
Actually, we are communicating with the SWD.
Mm-hmm.
Request for parent leaders of the four-piece recipient to also assist us. So we'll be constantly communicating with them, no, to ask for their approval, so that we can actually partner with them. So yung added tasks of four-piece recipients may include assisting our learners, no, in the community. We'll just have to
ko yun.
we'll just have to identify po kung sino din yung capable to provide, at least high school graduate siguro.
Yeah. Tapos magpo-provide kayo ng training for them, how they will supervise.
So they will be in constant communication with the subject area teacher so that the teacher can coach them how to teach the child sa community.
Oh, see? Galing.
Meron dyan. Meron pa tayong question ngayon. Kanina kasi comment. So, from Jim Paul Maceda Belgado, I'm preparing an interactive ebook which can be accessed offline through a mobile phone, tablet, or through a desktop. I'll be using Canva, Bitmoji, and other open source license. What are the other OER web materials can you suggest that I use? Thanks.
Well, marami pang pwedeng gamitin. Of course, it will depend on the subject area na ituturo or lalamanin nitong dito sa ginagawa mo na to, yung mga offline technologies o na ebook, interactive offline. Maganda kasi offline pero interactive. So it will engage our learners. Tapos matututunan nila yon. Sir Jim Paul, pakipunta na lang po doon sa mga repositories na inilagay ko doon sa PowerPoint. Pwede mo namang balikan kasi again recorded po itong natin, itong session natin, you can go back to the video recording so you can look at the ano, or you can even check, pwede nyo hanapin lang, ang kailangan lang nating malaman, ano yung license niya, just look for the Creative Commons license. You can also search ano-anong ibig sabihin kasi different levels din po yung Creative Commons license. Pwede nyo rin pong i-google kung ano-ano yung mga yon, and then you can already be directed to some OER repositories and the different subject areas. So sir, maganda po sana ma-share din natin yung inyong ginagawa para magamit din po ng ating mga fellow educators.
Okay. Before we go to the next question, from your presentation earlier, Doc Mel, about promote learning, yung learner content interaction. I guess it's also related to that when you make or draft something na kailangan kasi um, yung sa perspective nga ng teacher and sa learner, it has to be lang ngayon na hindi siya in person and it's online, kailangan it's easy to understand.
Mm-mm.
Kung baga it promotes lesser questions from the reader or from the learner. So importante talaga when you want to promote learning nga, kailangan i-consider mo yung paggawa mo ng content. It's easy to understand. You don't have to complicate
Yeah.
or you just have to simplify
Oo,
it.
oo, oo. Totoo.
So from Jennifer Reyes, hold on. Sorry. So from Mil Diadema Lustria, how can online teaching be used or maximized for our learners with disabilities? Does DepEd have appropriate educational technologies in place?
Si ma'am siguro.
Uh, right now po we are simulating the curriculum for children with special needs. So dina-dry run po namin siya. But the strategy po that we'll be using is parang yung coaching with the parents.
Mhm.
So that the teacher will coach the parents a week before so that the parents can assist the child. Kasi we're yung self-contained classes namin for special education is more of motor skills development lang. So we'll be providing them materials because there are available materials naman sa DepEd.
Yeah.
And ang gagawin lang po namin ngayon is more of ganon, coaching. Iko-coach po namin yung parents because mga LSENs naman po natin or ang mga learners natin with special needs oftentimes have adults
Supervision.
with that can supervise them po kasi kailangan talaga dun sa kanilang daily needs.
Yes.
So we're simulating it right now this week.
That's nice. Ako
Very
naman,
good.
if I may add, it was earlier mentioned about the universal design for learning. For those who are physically challenged, for instance, yung mata, pandinig, di ba? So if let's try to make our learning resources in multimedia format. So pwedeng makikinig lang sila, pwedeng teksto ang babasahin nila. We're talking Europe Online. Teksto ang babasahin. Pwede mo palakihan yung font size, ganyan. Halimbawa, katulad ko, pagka maliit na yung font size, hindi ko na mababasa yan. Kung teksto yung babasahin ko, papalakihan ko yung view ko. Diba? Or kung may problema sila sa mata, hindi sila nakakakita, pwede naman nilang pakinggan yung lesson. I remember one time, I have written a particular article, and what the publisher said was, for that particular article to be translated into a podcast para yung hindi nakakabasa ay pwedeng pakinggan yung material. So, very basic lang, very basic feature in making the materials in multimedia format, but somehow it can cater to different learning needs ng ating mga estudyante and make our learning resources more inclusive.
Correct. Agree. From Jennifer Reyes, online classes will be challenging on part of the teachers and students, especially for subject courses with laboratory skills laboratories with demo and return demonstrations. How can we do this?
Si Ma'am, baka may sagot si Ma'am, baka may plano na sila. Oo.
Actually, for senior high school, yun yung challenge namin, no? But DepEd instructed us to initially start with focusing on the core
Yeah.
competencies first, no? As we hope
Yes.
as we hope that everything will be okay in a few months' time, no? But if not, we can also implement the partial face-to-face, no?
Mm.
We're coordinating with the local government if they can
Very good.
provide us ELF, if na
Elf.
Ah,
pwede naming lagyan ng
lagyan
well-being
mo. Yeah.
Ah, correct,
dalahin sa
correct.
community
Yeah.
at pumunta din yung mga volunteer teachers natin to help the child, we can do that naman po. So we're very thankful because we have a lot of partners, stakeholders around us who can provide us help, especially the local government. But we are in the process of planning for it in case magtagal po
Yeah.
ang sitwasyon natin ngayon.
Oo.
Pinaghahandaan naman po namin to bring the laboratories to the community.
Where, yeah, to the community. If I may add, bigla na-inspire ako dun sa sinabi ni Ma'am even yung internet, yung mobile, ano na may internet, pwede rin gawin. So halimbawa, kasi nga meron tayo ng tinatawag na offline-online technology na initially pwede silang for a time, just for a specific time, naka-online sila and then ida-download na nila lahat ng materials, etc. And then pwede na nila sila mag-work offline. So may mga learning management system din na pwedeng ganon. So even the internet, pwede mong dalhin yan doon sa community, nakalagay din doon sa sinasabi ni Ma'am na ELP or ban or something. So you can bring even the internet to the community. So, yeah, so si Ma'am ngayon, laboratory na yung dadalhin niya doon sa where the learners are. So talaga may strategy. I'm happy to hear that as well.
Mm-mm. Correct, agree. So yung saying nga na it takes a village to
Yes,
raise
that's
a
the
child.
African proverb, takes a village to raise a
Yes.
child. Sige.
Question for Dr. Cheryl from Maria John Ray Repuno. When will the DepEd provide training for teachers in navigating LMS, which is tailored fit to each grade level? So how
Okay.
do you navigate LMS?
We are actually in the process of training our teachers, no? Each division offices did plan for their own training because it will depend on the learning modality that they chose to implement. So for us, because we chose to implement online distance learning, we do have two LMS right now. And the LMS for high school, nag-operate na yan since 2016 eh. So they are now in the process of training our teachers how to navigate the LMS. And then next week, we'll do the training naman on how to navigate our LMS for the elementary level.
Okay. From Orcel Ciares Sowibilil, when you mean connection, this can be done through online. But what about those who have slow to no connection at all? I guess not na discuss nyo na rin to kanina. But I guess kung pwede pa-share na lang po ulit.
Siguro on my end, syempre talaga pagka no connection at all, what are the ways by which we can still provide that kind of connection? So yung if I may take off from what Ma'am Cheryl has mentioned, meron silang mga ginugrupo-grupo nila, minamap nila yung mga estudyante and then connected sa kanilang mga para teachers. So in a way, hindi talaga isolated yung learner natin kasi may nakikita pa rin siya ng mga kapwa estudyante, pwedeng kaklase, at may para teacher pa rin na nakakonect sa kanya. 'Di ba? Ako, if you can still be more creative about it, you can write, sulat kamay, ibigay sa mga, ipabigay sa para teacher natin, sa ating barangay captain, sa mga kapartner natin sa community, at pwede nilang basahin ang mga notes na galing sa kanilang mga guro. Diba? So let's try to really adopt whatever technology that is available, even if it's a first generation technology na hindi magre-require ng internet. Ang importante, nakaka-communicate tayo with them.
All right. How do you develop critical thinking in distance education using the modular approach from Michael Ecoben?
Yeah, Sir Michael, I think kahit naman po sa classroom teaching, 'di ba? Talagang kakailangan natin pag-isipan what are the learning activities that we can develop so that we can have that we can develop that kind of critical thinking among our students. So it will depend on the learning activities na i-develop natin for our students. Hindi pwedeng ang learning activities na ibibigay natin sa kanila ay magka-copy and paste lang sila from the internet. That we really have to, even like debate for instance, ask our students to debate on a particular issue synchronously. Dito, magsasagutan sila. Doon mismo sila mag-iisip about specific issues. Kailangan magbasa sila. Kailangan they have to take a stand on a particular issue. And in so doing, kailangan pag-isipan nila, why am I taking this stand? Why am I pro? Why am I con? Something like that. So the critical thinking, developing the critical thinking will have to depend on the kind of learning activities that we will ask our students to do as part of our course design.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Question about copyrighted material from Arlene Carmona regarding Kotobi, author, an app for developing ebook type of material. The content is from the book and internet. Pwede po ito i-embed sa LMS. And ang concern
Ang
ko po
concern niya ay
magkaroon po kaya ito
oo.
ng copyright issue.
Yung siguro depende kung ano yung content na gagamitin mo in developing your ebook. If your content is copyrighted, baka magkaroon ng issue. Although, ang ano naman doon, yung iba, as long as, kasi if it's being used for education at hindi mo naman ibebenta yung ginawa mo, sometimes we are being allowed, educators are allowed to use a certain percentage of a copyrighted material for our lectures, and we will just cite the reference properly. So depende kung ano yung gagamitin mo when you are developing the ebook. Just to be sure, check the open educational resources para hindi ka masyadong magkaroon ng issue on copyright at i-embed mo doon sa yung online course. But then again, even if it's an open educational resources, you still have to check what kind of license, Creative Commons license, does it carry? Para alam mo din kung nasaan yung elbow room mo when it comes to using the material. So yun. So medyo ano yung malawak yung issue ng copyright kasi depende kung ano yung gagamitin mo at paano mo siya gagamitin. So ganun kalawak yung ano ng copyright and open educational resources.
Okay, thank you po. Hold on. I hope, Arlene, na-clarify din yung question mo. From Mary Jean Ibo Centeno, what can you advise po for us first-time module writers for remote learning to make our module more engaging?
Yun din ang sagot ko. Yung next session natin will be about engaging your online learners. But a very quick answer to your question is, again, your learning activities at kung paano mo i-design yung kurso mo. Hindi pwedeng basa lang sila ng basa. In fact, even yung screen time ng mga estudyante, hindi rin sila dapat lagi nakababad sa computer, ganyan. And in fact, when we design learning activities, we have to promote that kind of active learning na tinatawag nila. Yan, yung mga teachers natin, alam nyo yan. Oo. So yun yung klase na engagement na pwedeng ibigay sa kanila. So learning activities, designing the courses, they are the key to keep our courses engaging. So, ma'am, manood po kayo sa susunod na session. Yan, di ba? Nagkampanya.
Yes.
Oo. So, next session po natin, engaging online learners po tayo.
Opo. So talagang most of our actually questions are towards on the topic na how to promote yung learning kasi nga yung attention span so in person pa nga may challenge na tayo between engaging really our learners kasi yung attention span yan mabilis ma-distract.
Oo.
Lalo na pag online para mag-iba pang factors na they will surely get distracted. So for our next session, abangan na lang po natin. I hope to see you there. For the next question, I guess si Dr. Cheryl would be able to answer this kasi kanina during her time while she's talking, na-mention yung about assessment, yung sa test results. Paano mo nga ba yung ma-emphasize yung honesty pag may mga exam na. So, may question dito si Roland Palacio Conanan. How can you manage the online quiz? Then, ang bilis ng sagot, nanay pala sumagot. Ano po masasabi nyo dito? Kaya, yun,
Actually,
curious din ako dito.
yes, isa to talaga sa issue namin na pinag-uusapan, no? Kaya sabi ko talagang isama namin talaga mabuti yung engagement with the parents to have them sign sort of a pledge of honesty to explain to them. Kasi initially yun talaga eh. We designed a manual for the parents, no? And
Yeah.
we will be distributing this manual to explain to them that hindi mo natutulungan yung bata kung ikaw
Oo.
yung
Let
magsasagot
go.
ng niya. But of course, yung quiz kasi for DepEd are just formative assessments. Eh.
Correct, correct.
So, if at the end of it, in-assess ka namin sa dulo, ikaw din yung
Yeah.
magsasuffer if hindi ito yung
Correct.
toong score mo talaga. So,
Mhm.
we are explaining that to the parents, no, na hindi talaga matutulungan yung bata. But ang
Oo, pag,
pinag-iisipan namin ngayon is how to do the summative assessment, no, at the end of the quarter. But the Department of Education is revising the assessment guidelines. So we're awaiting the revised version for us to really plan ahead, no, kung anong plano namin gawin. But if the same, we have to administer quarterly exam, baka I guess pwede na namin silang puntahan sa community para magbigay
Yeah.
talaga ng
Yeah.
exam for
ng
certain
exam.
Yes.
number of learners.
Oo.
Yun po yung plano namin sanang gawin if hindi magbabago po yung proseso ng assessment ni DepEd.
Kasi ma'am, yung mga para-teachers po natin, they can even supervise and administer the exam. I
Yes.
mean, yeah, if that is really the mechanism of assessment, yung may mga quarterly exams pa rin, then we can use the para-teachers, we can use barangay halls, we can, marami. I mean, or even a number of the students can go to the school na hindi naman sama-sama. Of course,
Yes.
kailangan i-assess nating mabuti yan. 'Di ba? So may mga ganun, maraming mechanism. Yung doon sa online quiz na sinabi kanina, tama yung gusto ko lang suportahan yung sinabi ni Ma'am. Sa formative assessment siya, and it really helps even the learners assess may natutunan ba ako? Ganyan. Kasi yun yung purpose natin in giving that particular online quiz. It's self-assessment. Ngayon, kung ang nanay ang sasagot, sabihin natin, nanay, naglolokohan lang tayo dito at
Oo,
kawawa yung anak mo. I mean,
correct.
we have to emphasize that. Kawawa yung anak mo pag ikaw ang sumagot. Kasi pagdating ng exam, mamaya, proctored exam na yan para teachers ay magbibigay. Anong isasagot nung bata? Wala na si nanay doon. 'Di ba? So, we really have to emphasize that. And that's the reason why it's really very important that we get the teacher, the parents and the guardians as our partners. Kaya sabi ko, mas importante
Agree.
ngayon na ma-emphasize yung role nung parents and guardians. Partner naman natin sila even before Pero ngayon, kailangan yung pagiging active nila, and then yung ano talaga magiging role nila in this mode of instruction. Ganyan. So napaka-importante. Kaya orientation nga din ng mga parents ang importante dito. Ganyan. So marami
I
marami
agree.
kailangan gawin. Oo. So yun din yung I agree with Ma'am Cheryl's suggestion.
And then yung kumbaga what you said kanina din, to emphasize on honesty, I guess we have to have a positive approach.
Mm-hmm.
Well, nakikita naman yan sa results. So
Oo.
while more learners are engaged online,
Mm-hmm.
kumbaga nandiyan na sila sa online, kumbaga nagpa-participate, nagbibigay na ng oras, it only means na they want to learn.
Yeah.
Despite this situation that we are in right now, they're willing to adjust. So doon na lang, actually tiwala na lang talaga tayo
Oo.
na gusto niyang
Kailangan
matuto. So
kailangan natin
parents should,
emphasize.
yeah,
Oo.
sayang din kasi dahil syempre give the floor to the teachers and not dive into dive into to the space na kung nandun yung learners nga, mga anak natin. So you have to let go and trust. So hold on. From April for Tuito, please give us an example of how can we conduct performance tasks through online learning. We have 5 minutes to go.
Oo. Siguro
Three
kung,
questions
kung,
pa
kung
yata.
meron kung meron nang dinedesign ngayon sina Ma'am for DepEd, I will give the floor to Ma'am Sherry.
Actually, sa schedule po kasi ng online distance, yung
Inuhuli
online
ko yun.
class, o yung online class po namin, we devoted Friday as a
Mhm.
day for coaching and preparation of performance tasks. So
Mm-mm.
we are allowed naman to give written exercises to the learners. So pwede yon as a performance task. O they
Mhm.
can conduct their own experiment at
Mm.
home.
Yes.
Opo, kaya lang ang challenge sa writer right now is how do we ensure that the materials that the learner will use are those materials readily available at home. So
Totoo yan.
yun yung medyo, actually that's very challenging for a module writer eh. Yun yung medyo ano namin ngayon. But yun yung gusto naming mangyari sana sa performance task. We can always think of ways on how we can assess yung performance ng bata using tools and materials that are readily available at home. And there are other things naman like written output or recitation like Ma'am Dr. Mel was mentioning a while ago na pwede pa rin po natin ibigay sa mga bata.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So, quickly, question po from Hertrudes Lanawan Peras. Is there a unified format in making modules for modular instructions, ma'am? Thank you so much.
Si Ma'am sasagot.
Ang Department of Education po
Meron.
issued the LR standards, no? May contained na po doon yung format
Yeah.
of the modules and the different parts of the modules. Yun po yung in-adopt namin sa division. But also the National Capital Regional Office also released their own format. This is more of a mas fewer page a format of modules. So yun po yung pwedeng i-adopt either of the two po.
Okay.
All right. From Arellano, Jane Aikin Montesilio, Arellano Villaver. I'm worried about the TLE subject which comes with different areas of specialization, say computer hardware servicing. How can a student go through the process without the materials
Yun
and
ang
equipment at home in their performance tasks?
parang
This
kapareho na yan nung
other
ginawang
areas in the TLE like cookery, electricity, and others. All right.
parang halos kapareho na yan nung sagot kanina ni
Kanina. From Mary Rose Escatron Gastilola Capito. Mahaba yung pangalan niya. How is the grading system be done if there are two different learning modalities?
Ma'am Cheryl, may sagot kayo dyan?
We are still awaiting po the release of the revised guidelines po for assessment sa current curriculum natin po ngayon. Alam ko po the draft is already prepared. So we're awaiting the signed department order.
Okay. Ako, offhand, from a general perspective, nung una, pagka may nagbabasa kayo ng mga literature about online learning, etc. Sabi nila, ang inaano nila, wag na magbigay ng grade. Yun yung perspective ng iba. Wag na magbigay ng grade because in times like this daw, during the time of pandemic, what you are grading is the privilege. Parang gano'n. Yun yung perspective ng iba, no? Ako naman, ang sabi ko, ano ba ang ating tinitingnan? All our assessment will be based on how the students were able to achieve the learning outcomes. So ang ating assessment ay nakabase sa learning outcomes. We are not assessing how the student access the internet. Of course, ang challenge nga nito, sabi nga ni Ma'am kanina, ay ang nasa module developers in such a way na yung learning outcomes ay ma-achieve pa rin ng estudyante kung magbabasa lang ako o i-access ko yung internet. So for me, para lang magkaroon ng yung leveling of the playing field, ang magiging basis natin lagi sa learning assessment will be the learning outcomes. Now, if you are open, of course, it will still depend on the Department of Education. Yung iba talaga, sinabi nila, pass or fail lang tayo. May ganun. Pass or fail. Wala na yung may mataas na grade, may honor, etc. Pass or fail. Kung na-achieve mo learning outcomes, pass ka. Pag di mo na-achieve ang learning outcomes, fail ka. Pero ngayon, even yung pagbibigay ng grade ng fail, medyo hinay-hinay rin daw tayo. So ako, learning outcomes, even with the different modalities of learning, whether pass or fail or grade, learning outcomes will still be the basis. So yun yung sagot ko pag kaya niyan tanong sa akin.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mel. Thank you, Dr. Cheryl. Thank
Ma'am
you,
Cheryl,
everybody.
thank you very much, Ma'am Cheryl, ha. We really
Po,
appreciate your time.
Oo.
din po.
Thank you so much for answering, clarifying. Everybody who's commenting and asking questions till our next session. Maraming salamat po sa participation at oras niyong lahat. Sa mga nakikinig ngayon, taking time from your very busy schedule. Let me just recap the following points taken kanina. Quickly lang. So yung mga takeaway ko lang from Dr. Cheryl's presentation and from Dr. Mel's presentation. We have to ponder these points, and kailangan i-consider din natin yung mga perspective ng teacher, ng learner, and the community in our environment. So one is yung who is capable to be online. So we have to consider that, as mentioned by Dr. Cheryl in her presentation, the capacity of teachers, and then we have to help them in uh, building that capability, filling the gaps in our training sa mga teachers natin, translation of modules. We have to consider yung printed versus yung digitized. And then of course, yung kaninang na bring up, yung assessment, test results, and we have to emphasize on honesty and have a positive approach while kung engaged na yung mga learners natin, we have to believe in them both as a parent and as a teacher. Of course, yung instructional materials, it has to be very basic, and simplicity is key. So, and then of course, yung time of interactions, there we have to really find the balance wherever we are, kung nasa labas tayo and mostly at home, kailangan lang natin mahanap yung right rhythm and balance. And then of course, yung promoting learning, considering a learner and content interaction, learner and then the teacher. And then of course, yung achievement of our objectives, keeping the learners engaged. Learners need to feel connected, yon. Very striking yung point na bring up ni Dr. Mel about that. You have to, kasi pag online, hindi mo talaga alam or nakikita yung learner yung expressions niya. So kailangan, as much as possible, you have to take time in thinking about the side of the learner na kailangan talaga ma-engage mo siya. So with this webinar session and the upcoming sessions that we will be having, that's when we hope it would address these points. And then, of course, yung technology that we have to, marami kasing applications in front of us that we could utilize. You just have to take time in navigating the app para ma-maximize mo talaga kung paano ka magtuturo, para ma-utilize mo yung pinaka-app, yung pinaka-use niya. And then, of course, embracing learning, embracing this new normal. Yun yung, yun yung key doon. That you, this whole new normal, you just have to embrace yung changes na nangyayari. And then, lastly, sa quote, let me quote lang Dr. Mill. So comparing one form of education to another only distracts us from the fact that all forms can be better. So, yun po. Before I close, let me invite you, all listeners, online. On August 3, our next session, It's at 2 p.m. This is what we've been waiting for also about engaging your learners online. So we have another guest, SDS, and Dr. Mel as well for the lead speaker. So some quick reminders lang po before we go on the issuance of certificates. Note lang po na the name that you have to indicate in the evaluation will be the same name to be written on the certificates. So correct lang po. Make sure that you're writing the correct spelling para pag-print na mga certificates, tama po siya. Please don't forget to evaluate this event and answer the questions. The online evaluation forms will start receiving responses right after this event, this webinar, and will be available within the next 6 hours. As shown in the screen, you may scan the QR code or go to the Bitly site indicated. The certificates will be automatically sent to those who completed their evaluation forms and were able to answer 7 out of the 10 questions correctly. So there, kindly note na lang po all the points taken. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you again on August 5, August 3, yeah, 2 p.m.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mom Cheryl. Thank you. Thank you very much.